The first warning came at 0347 hours, Coordinated Universal Time, when every military installation on Earth simultaneously detected the massive alien fleet dropping out of hyperspace just beyond Neptune's orbit. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Pentagon's war room, watching the holographic display populate with red dots that seemed to multiply like a digital cancer across the solar system's edge. "How many?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of humanity's fate pressing down on her shoulders. "Initial count shows 300 vessels, Admiral. Each one approximately the size of our largest aircraft carriers." Lieutenant Morrison's hands trembled as he operated the tactical display. "They're maintaining formation at 4.2 billion kilometers from Earth." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of computers processing humanity's potential extinction. Chen had spent 30 years climbing the ranks, fighting in conflicts from the South China Sea to the European continental wars. But nothing had prepared her for this moment, humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, and they had arrived with an armada. The communication came 12 hours later, broadcast simultaneously across every frequency, in every human language, and somehow, directly into the minds of every person on Earth. The voice was melodic yet alien, carrying undertones that made human listeners inexplicably uncomfortable. "Primitive inhabitants of the third planet. We are the HFY Dominion. Your species has been observed and evaluated. You are found. Amusing. Your primitive weapons, your crude defenses, your laughable attempts at space travel entertain us greatly. We have decided to play a game with you." Chen clenched her fists as the alien voice continued its mocking address. "We will advance our fleet in stages. You will be permitted to use your most advanced weapons against us. When your pathetic resistance inevitably fails, we will claim your world, and your species will serve as entertainment. Your struggling against our superior technology will provide us with considerable amusement before we decide your ultimate fate." The transmission ended, leaving 7 billion humans to contemplate their helplessness. Panic erupted in major cities as people fled population centers. But Chen knew there was nowhere to run. If these aliens possessed faster than light travel and could broadcast telepathically to an entire planet, conventional evacuation would be meaningless. Over the following week, the HFY proved their words with calculated demonstrations of superiority. They sent single ships to various locations around Earth, hovering over military bases and major cities when humanity's most advanced fighter jets approached. The alien vessels generated energy fields that simply stopped the aircraft mid-flight, holding them suspended like insects in amber before gently depositing them back on the ground, completely unharmed but utterly humiliated. Nuclear submarines attempting to maintain hidden positions found themselves suddenly surfaced by some invisible force, their crews uninjured but their stealth capabilities rendered useless. Missile defense systems activated and fired at the alien craft, only to watch their most sophisticated projectiles freeze in mid-air before dissolving into harmless particles that sparkled like glitter in the sunlight. The aliens' message was clear. Resist if you wish, but your resistance is merely entertainment. They cataloged every weapon system humanity possessed, from handheld firearms to intercontinental ballistic missiles, and neutralized each demonstration with casual ease. The psychological impact was devastating. Military morale plummeted as soldiers realized their training and equipment were utterly inadequate against this threat. But Chen refused to surrender hope. In the deepest levels of the Pentagon, she assembled a small team of her most trusted advisors and began exploring unconventional options. If traditional warfare was useless, perhaps humanity needed to think beyond traditional boundaries. "What do we know about their demonstrations?" she asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Pentagon's chief xenobiology consultant, who had been hastily reassigned from studying deep-sea organisms to analyzing alien behavior. "They're showing off," Dr. Vasquez replied, reviewing footage of the alien interventions. "Every action they've taken seems designed to humiliate, rather than destroy. They could have eliminated our weapons entirely, but instead they're neutralizing them in ways that maximize our sense of helplessness." "Psychological warfare," muttered Colonel James Wright, Chen's chief tactical advisor. They want us broken before they even begin their real assault. Chen nodded, studying the patterns of alien behavior. They're treating this like a game. Just as they said. They want to see how we respond to overwhelming superiority. But games have rules, and rules can sometimes be exploited. Admiral, with respect, what kind of exploitation could possibly work against technology that can stop nuclear weapons like children's toys? Wright's question carried the exhaustion of a career military officer watching his life's work become obsolete overnight. Chen turned to the wall display showing real-time positions of the alien fleet. They've demonstrated their ability to neutralize our conventional weapons. But notice what they haven't done. They haven't attacked our personnel directly. They haven't destroyed our infrastructure. They're playing with us, which means they have constraints, whether self-imposed or otherwise. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. You think they're operating under some kind of code? Possibly. Or maybe they're just supremely confident. Either way, their arrogance might be their weakness. Chen pulled up a classified file on her tablet. There's something I want to explore. A program that was quietly developed during the Central Asian conflicts. Something the aliens might not expect, because it doesn't fit conventional military profiles. The file detailed Project Longshot, a highly classified program that had identified and trained individuals with extraordinary natural marksmanship abilities. Not just skilled snipers, but people who seemed to possess an almost supernatural connection to projectile weapons. The program had been considered too unconventional for mainstream military use, but one individual had stood out among all candidates. Marcus Steele had been recruited from the Montana wilderness where he had been living as a hunting guide. His shooting abilities had initially been dismissed as exaggerated folklore, until military testers witnessed him consistently hitting targets at distances that shouldn't have been possible with standard equipment. He could calculate wind resistance, gravitational drop, and environmental factors intuitively, making shots that computers suggested were impossible. More remarkably, Steele seemed to operate by instinct rather than technology. He preferred simple, mechanical weapons to advanced electronic systems. He made shots using iron sights that trained military snipers missed with computer-assisted targeting systems. His success rate in controlled tests had been so extraordinary that some researchers privately speculated he possessed some form of enhanced spatial processing that bordered on the supernatural. The program had been quietly shelved when the Central Asian conflicts ended, and Steele had returned to civilian life. But Chen remembered reading his file and being impressed not just by his abilities, but by his psychological profile. Unlike most military sharpshooters who relied heavily on technology and training protocols, Steele seemed to function best when operating independently, using minimal equipment and trusting his natural instincts. You want to send one man against an alien armada? Wright stared at Chen, as if she had suggested attacking with medieval siege weapons. Not exactly. I want to see if someone who operates completely outside conventional military thinking might find an angle that conventional warfare can't. Chen pulled up Steele's last known address. The aliens have neutralized everything that looks like a military threat. But what if we approach this from a direction they're not monitoring? Dr. Vasquez studied Steele's profile with growing interest. Someone who doesn't rely on the technology they've already cataloged. Someone whose capabilities don't fit their database of human military potential. It's worth exploring, Chen decided. At worst, we confirm that even our most unconventional assets are ineffective. At best, we discover that their superiority isn't as absolute as they want us to believe. Wright shook his head, but began accessing communication channels. I'll find him. But Admiral, even if this individual possesses extraordinary abilities, what could one person possibly accomplish against spacecraft that can neutralize nuclear weapons? Chen stared at the display showing the alien fleet, slowly advancing toward Earth's inner solar system. I don't know, Colonel, but conventional thinking has already failed. Maybe it's time to try something unconventional. As the team began tracking down Marcus Steele, the alien fleet continued its leisurely approach toward Earth. The HFY maintained their schedule of daily demonstrations, each one designed to showcase another aspect of human military inadequacy. They disabled spy satellites with casual pulses of energy, They neutralized experimental railgun tests before the projectiles could even leave their launching tubes. They seemed to possess complete knowledge of every weapon system humanity had developed. But they had not yet encountered Marcus Steele. And as Chen was beginning to hope, perhaps there were aspects of human capability that even advanced alien intelligence gathering had overlooked. The hunt for humanity's most unconventional marksman was about to begin. The helicopter found Marcus Steele exactly where his file indicated, a remote cabin in the Absaroka Mountains of Montana, 40 miles from the nearest paved road. As the military transport descended toward the makeshift landing zone, Admiral Chen could see a lone figure standing on the cabin's porch, completely unfazed by the arrival of military aircraft in his isolated wilderness home. Marcus Steele looked exactly as Chen had expected from his photographs, yet somehow more substantial in person. Tall and lean with weathered features that spoke of years spent in harsh environments, he possessed an absolute stillness that seemed unusual even for someone accustomed to solitude. His eyes tracked the helicopter's approach with the patient attention of a predator evaluating potential threats. "Mr. Steele," Chen called out as she disembarked, having to raise her voice over the helicopter's rotor wash. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, United States Navy. I need to speak with you about a matter of urgent national security." Steele nodded once and gestured toward his cabin. As the helicopter lifted off to establish a perimeter, Chen followed him inside, surprised by the cabin's Spartan mention. The interior was meticulously organized, with handcrafted furniture and shelves lined with books on subjects ranging from ballistics to wildlife biology. What struck her most was the complete absence of electronic devices. No television, no computer, not even a digital clock. "You're here about the aliens," Steele said, settling into a wooden chair that he had clearly built himself. His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being right about things that mattered. Chen raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" "I've been watching the sky. Saw things that don't belong up there. Figured someone would eventually remember the weird projects they used to run and come looking for people like me." Steele poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that had been brewing on his wood-burning stove. "Besides, you don't send an admiral to the middle of nowhere unless the regular solutions aren't working." Chen accepted the coffee, appreciating both its quality and Steele's directness. "You're correct. Conventional military responses have been completely ineffective. The aliens seem to possess technology that can neutralize any weapon system we've deployed against them." "Technology," Steele repeated thoughtfully. "What kind of technology?" Chen spent the next hour describing the alien demonstrations, the energy fields that stopped aircraft, the invisible forces that disabled missiles and submarines. Steele listened without interruption, occasionally asking precise questions about distances, timing, and specific details that Chen hadn't considered significant. "They're not using technology," Steele concluded when Chen finished her briefing. "At least, not the way you're thinking about it." "What do you mean?" Steele walked to a window overlooking the valley below his cabin. "I spent 5 years tracking grizzly bears for the Fish and Wildlife Service. Bears are smart, but they think differently than humans. When you're trying to predict their behavior, you can't use human logic. You have to understand their perspective." Chen joined him at the window, not sure where this analogy was leading. "These aliens are doing the same thing to us that we do to animals we consider inferior. When we want to relocate a bear, we don't negotiate or fight it directly. We tranquilize it from a distance, move it while it's unconscious, and release it somewhere else. From the bear's perspective, it just mysteriously loses consciousness and wakes up in a different place. The bear can't comprehend our methods because it doesn't understand our capabilities." "You're suggesting the aliens aren't actually neutralizing our weapons through superior technology?" "I'm saying they're thinking about the problem differently than we are. Your weapons aren't failing because they're inadequate. They're failing because the aliens are approaching the entire conflict from an angle that makes conventional weapons irrelevant." Steele turned back to Chen. "But that might also mean they have blind spots." Chen felt a spark of hope. "What kind of blind spots?" When you're dealing with animals, the biggest mistakes come from overconfidence. You assume you understand all their capabilities because you've cataloged their obvious ones. But sometimes, animals surprise you. Steele moved to a gun cabinet and withdrew a rifle that looked almost primitive compared to modern military weapons. This is a 1903 Springfield. Mechanical action, no electronics, no computer assistance. It fires a 30-06 cartridge, using technology that's over 100 years old. Chen examined the rifle, noting its worn but meticulously maintained condition. You think something this simple could succeed where advanced weapons failed? I think something this simple might not register as a weapon to beings who are scanning for advanced military technology. When you're looking for bears, you don't usually worry about mosquitoes. Steele began checking the rifle's action with practiced efficiency. The question isn't whether this rifle can damage their spacecraft. The question is whether they'll even notice it long enough to activate their defenses. Chen felt her pulse quicken. You're willing to attempt this? I'm willing to try something. But not here, and not the way your military would normally approach the problem. Steele, return the rifle to its case. If this has any chance of working, it has to be done on my terms, using my methods. What do you need? Steele moved to a detailed topographical map mounted on his wall. I need to get close to one of their ships. Close enough to make a shot that they won't anticipate until it's too late to stop. Chen studied the map, noting the remote locations Steele had marked. How close? Within a mile would be ideal. Half a mile would be better. The shot needs to be made before they realize a threat exists. Steele traced a route through mountainous terrain. Their demonstrations have been focused on populated areas and military installations, but they've ignored wilderness regions. They probably don't consider them strategically significant. A mile? You're talking about shooting at a spacecraft from a mile away with a rifle from 1903? Thank you, Wanqing. Steele smiled for the first time since Chen had arrived. Admiral, I've shot elk at 1,200 yards in a snowstorm with this rifle. I've killed charging grizzly bears at 300 yards while they were running through dense forest. Spacecraft are bigger than elk, and they hover in predictable patterns. Chen realized she was either witnessing exceptional confidence or dangerous delusion. But conventional approaches had failed completely, even if you could hit their ship. What makes you think a 100-year-old bullet could damage technology advanced enough for interstellar travel? Maybe it can't. But maybe their defenses are designed to stop advanced weapons, not primitive projectiles. Maybe they're so focused on neutralizing sophisticated threats that they've overlooked simple ones. Steele began gathering equipment from various locations around the cabin. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. And this accomplishes nothing except proving that every human weapon is useless. But you're willing to try. I'm willing to try because sitting in this cabin waiting for aliens to decide my fate isn't acceptable. I've spent my life in situations where the only choice was between action and helplessness. I prefer action. Chen made her decision. What do you need from me? Transportation to a location where I can observe their patrol patterns without being detected, access to meteorological data for ballistic calculations, and a promise that your people won't interfere once I'm in position. You want to do this alone? I work better alone. Always have. If this is going to succeed, it needs to be done by someone operating completely outside military protocols. Steele shouldered a pack that contained equipment Chen couldn't identify. Your military thinks in terms of coordinated attacks, overwhelming firepower, and technological superiority. I think in terms of patience, precision, and using the environment to my advantage. Chen realized she was about to authorize an operation that defied every principle of modern warfare. A single individual, using century-old technology, attempting to accomplish what nuclear weapons had failed to achieve. But as Steele prepared his equipment with methodical precision, she found herself believing that perhaps the most unconventional approach might be exactly what the situation required. Over the following hours, Chen's team established a base of operations in a remote valley that offered clear sightlines to the alien patrol routes. Steele studied the aliens' movement patterns with the same intensity he had once applied to tracking dangerous wildlife. He noted their timing, their altitude preferences, their response patterns to various stimuli, their creatures of habit, he observed after 2 days of surveillance. They follow the same routes at the same times. They maintain consistent distances from terrain features. They're not expecting threats from this type of environment. Chen watched through military binoculars as alien craft passed overhead with mechanical regularity. "You really think you can hit one of those things?" Steele adjusted the scope on his rifle, taking measurements and making calculations using methods that seemed to rely more on instinct than mathematics. "Admiral, I've been hunting in these mountains for 20 years. I know how wind behaves in these valleys. I know how temperature affects bullet trajectory. I know how to account for target movement and environmental variables. But those targets were animals, not alien spacecraft. Animals are harder. They change direction unexpectedly. They use cover. They actively try to avoid being shot." Steele settled into a shooting position that offered concealment behind natural rock formations. Those spacecraft follow predictable paths. They don't take evasive action because they don't expect threats from ground level. As Steele prepared for what might be humanity's most unconventional military engagement, Chen realized she was witnessing something that existed outside the normal boundaries of warfare. Not the clash of technologies or the coordination of military units, but the application of individual skill and natural ability against an enemy that had never encountered such an approach. The next phase of their desperate plan was about to begin. The morning of the attempt dawned clear and cold, with minimal wind conditions that Steele declared perfect for long-range shooting. He had spent 3 days studying the alien patrol patterns, timing their movements with a mechanical stopwatch, and recording observations in a leather-bound notebook filled with hand-drawn diagrams and ballistic calculations. Admiral Chen watched through high-powered binoculars as Steele settled into his final shooting position, a natural rock outcropping that provided both concealment and a clear field of fire toward the aliens' regular flight path. The location was 1,500 meters from the predicted intercept point, well beyond the range most military snipers would consider practical with conventional equipment. "Contact in 43 minutes, Chen reported through her radio headset to the Pentagon Command Center, where military leaders from around the world monitored what might be humanity's last desperate gambit. Steele made final adjustments to his rifle scope, moving with the deliberate precision of someone who understood that rushed actions led to missed opportunities. His breathing had settled into the slow, controlled rhythm Chen recognized from watching military marksmen, but his overall demeanor seemed more relaxed than any soldier she had observed in combat situations. "You seem remarkably calm for someone about to attempt the impossible," Chen observed. "Stress makes you miss," Steele replied, without taking his eye from the scope. "I've learned to treat every shot the same way, whether I'm hunting deer or trying to save the human species. Focus on the fundamentals and trust your preparation." The alien craft appeared precisely on schedule, following their established route through the mountain valley with mechanical predictability. The ship was roughly the size of a city bus, hovering approximately 200 feet above the terrain and moving at what Steele estimated to be 40 miles per hour. "Range confirmed at 1,460 meters, Steele reported quietly. "Wind speed, negligible. Temperature stable. Target maintaining predictable course and speed." Chen held her breath as Steele began his final preparations. The rifle he was using looked absurdly primitive compared to the technological marvel drifting through the valley. But Steele handled the weapon with absolute confidence. "Taking the shot in 30 seconds, Steele announced, his voice carrying no trace of doubt or hesitation. Chen watched the alien spacecraft through her binoculars, noting its smooth, unblemished surface that showed no indication of defensive systems or weapons. The craft's movements were so regular they seemed almost automated, as if the aliens inside were completely confident that nothing in Earth's wilderness could threaten them. Steele's rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed off the surrounding mountains. Chen immediately shifted her binoculars to track the spacecraft, expecting to see either complete failure or the familiar energy fields that had neutralized every previous human attack. Instead, She watched a small hole appear in the craft's hull, followed immediately by a thin stream of some kind of atmospheric gas venting into the mountain air. The spacecraft's smooth flight pattern wavered slightly, then began losing altitude as its occupants apparently struggled to maintain control. "Direct hit," Steele reported, with the same calm tone he might use to describe successful deer hunting. "Hull breach confirmed. Looks like I punctured something important." Chen stared in disbelief as the alien craft made an emergency landing in a clearing roughly half a mile from their position. The ship settled heavily onto the ground, its normally graceful movements replaced by the obvious mechanical difficulties of a damaged vehicle. "My God," Chen whispered. "It actually worked." Steele was already packing his equipment with practiced efficiency. "We should relocate before they send reinforcements. They'll want to investigate what happened to their patrol craft." Chen activated her radio. "Pentagon Command, this is Admiral Chen. The target has been successfully engaged. The alien craft has made an emergency landing and appears to be disabled." The response from Pentagon Command was immediate and excited. But Chen barely heard the congratulations and requests for detailed reports. She was watching Steele methodically clean his rifle as if he had just completed a routine hunting expedition. "How did you know it would work?" she asked. "I didn't. But I knew their defenses hadn't activated against conventional projectiles at long range because they'd never encountered conventional projectiles at long range. Their scanning systems are designed to detect advanced weapons launches, not individual bullets fired from primitive rifles." Steele gestured toward the disabled spacecraft. "They've been studying human military capabilities, but they focused on studying military technology. They cataloged our missiles, our aircraft. But a simple rifle firing a simple bullet from extreme range didn't register as a military threat because it doesn't fit their understanding of how humans conduct warfare." Chen realized the implications of what had just occurred. "You're saying they have a blind spot for individual capability rather than technological capability." "Exactly. They understand human military organization, but they don't understand human individual potential. They neutralized our armies, but they never considered our hunters." Steele shouldered his pack and began moving toward an extraction point. From their perspective, individual humans using primitive weapons shouldn't be capable of threatening advanced spacecraft. As they relocated to avoid potential alien response forces, Chen's radio crackled with reports from around the world. News of the successful attack had spread rapidly through military channels, and other countries were beginning to implement similar strategies using their own unconventional marksmen. "Admiral, we're receiving reports of successful engagements from multiple locations," Pentagon Command reported. "Australian Special Forces report a disabled alien craft near Alice Springs. A former Russian military sniper has successfully engaged a target in Siberia. It appears that conventional marksmanship is proving effective against alien technology." Steele smiled grimly. "The aliens' biggest advantage was psychological. They convinced us our technology was useless, so we stopped trying unconventional approaches. But individual skill isn't technology. It's something they couldn't scan, or catalog, or predict." Over the following hours, reports continued to arrive of successful engagements by individual marksmen operating independently around the world. Former military snipers, hunting guides, competitive shooters, and others with exceptional marksmanship abilities were discovering that patient, precise shooting from unexpected angles could breach alien defenses that had neutralized humanity's most advanced weapons. The alien response was swift, but revealed the extent of their miscalculation. Instead of the overwhelming technological superiority they had displayed against military units, individual alien craft began showing vulnerability to attacks they hadn't anticipated. Their defense systems had been designed to counter military-grade weapons, not individual projectiles fired by humans operating outside conventional military protocols. Chen watched as Steele studied reports of other successful engagements, noting patterns and sharing observations with the growing network of unconventional marksmen who were proving that human individual capability had been consistently underestimated by alien intelligence gathering. "They're adapting," Steele observed after reviewing the latest tactical reports. New alien patrols are flying higher and changing their routes more frequently, but they're still thinking in terms of conventional military responses. What do you mean? They're trying to stay out of range of the weapons they've observed, but they're calculating range based on military sniper capabilities. They don't understand that some humans can make shots at distances beyond what military training typically covers. Steele pointed to satellite imagery showing alien formations adjusting their tactics. They're flying at altitudes designed to avoid military marksmen, but they're still within range for someone willing to attempt shots that military doctrine would consider impractical. Chen realized that humanity's salvation was coming not from superior technology or coordinated military strategy, but from the exceptional abilities of individuals who operated outside conventional limitations. The aliens had prepared for human military capability, but had never considered human individual potential. As Steele prepared for his next engagement, Chen understood that the tide of the conflict was shifting not because humanity had developed better weapons, but because humanity had remembered that individual excellence could achieve what technological superiority could not. The alien invasion was failing not because humans had superior technology, but because aliens had underestimated the capabilities of individual humans willing to attempt the impossible. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the alien fleet had arrived, humanity had reason for hope. The galaxy's most advanced species had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human capability, and individuals like Marcus Steele were proving that sometimes the most primitive approaches were the most effective. As Steele settled into position for another shot, Chen realized she was witnessing something that would reshape humanity's understanding of its own potential. The battle for Earth was being won not by armies or advanced weapons, but by individual humans who refused to accept that their limitations were defined by their technology. The aliens had taunted Earth's defenses, expecting conventional military responses. Instead, humanity had sent its deadliest asset: individuals with the skill, determination, and unconventional thinking necessary to succeed where traditional approaches had failed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy was about to learn that human individual potential was far more dangerous than alien intelligence had ever imagined.